I never allowed my grandson to enter the design studio. When he got engaged to a woman who only saw opportunities, I installed motion sensors and cameras, and I had been waiting for exactly this moment. So I started my plan. My name is Harold, and I'm 67 years old. I live in a quiet neighborhood in North Vancouver, British Columbia, where I've spent the last 43 years of my life. My wife Eleanor passed away when our daughter Sarah was only 28. A drunk driver took both Sarah and Eleanor on the same rainy November night in 2007. It left me shattered, but I had one reason to keep going. My grandson Alex, who was only 9 years old at the time. I raised Alex from that moment on. Just the two of us in this house, overlooking the mountains. I taught him to value hard work, integrity, and family above everything else. I'd spent my career as an architect, starting at a small firm in downtown Vancouver when I was 24, eventually becoming a partner, and then retiring 5 years ago at 62. But architecture wasn't just my profession. It was my calling. Alex grew up to be a decent young man. He became a software developer at a tech startup in Gastown, living in a small apartment near Commercial Drive. He wasn't wealthy by Vancouver standards, but he was content. He had his mother's gentle spirit and my practical mind. At 26, he seemed happy with his life, focused on his coding projects and his close group of friends. I was proud of him. But then he met Madison. It was at a networking event for young professionals in Yaletown. Alex had gone reluctantly, dragged along by a coworker. Madison was there as someone's plus one, working the room like she owned it. She was 24, Instagram ready, beautiful, and she knew exactly how to make an impression. Within 2 weeks, they were dating. Within 2 months, Alex was convinced she was his future. I met her for the first time at a Sunday brunch at my house. She arrived wearing clothes that screamed designer labels, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than Alex's monthly rent. She was charming, I'll give her that, but something felt wrong from the start. The way her eyes cataloged everything in my home, calculating, appraising. The way she steered conversation toward my career, my property, my retirement plans. Alex lived independently in his one-bedroom apartment on Commercial, a place he'd rented for 3 years. He was self-sufficient, paying his own bills, building his own life. I was proud of that independence. But Madison seemed disappointed when she learned he didn't own property yet in Vancouver's impossible market. I caught the slight frown she quickly masked with a practiced smile. During brunch, she asked about the separate building behind my house. A converted garage that I'd transformed into a design studio 30 years ago. I told her it was my workspace where I kept professional materials. I kept the answer deliberately vague. Alex knew never to enter that studio without my permission. It had been an unspoken rule since he was a child. The studio was my sanctuary, my private domain, and he respected that boundary. What Alex didn't know was what I kept in that studio. For 43 years, I'd worked as an architect. I'd designed some of Vancouver's most recognizable buildings, a mixed-use development in Kitsilano, an office tower downtown, several heritage restoration projects in Gastown, a waterfront complex in Cole Harbour. But beyond the projects I'd designed for clients, I'd invested every spare dollar into something else. Commercial real estate. I'd started small. A tiny retail space in Mount Pleasant in 1982, then a small office building in New Westminster. Over the decades, I'd accumulated a portfolio, 7 commercial properties across Metro Vancouver. Each one carefully selected, purchased when the market dipped, managed meticulously. Combined, the properties were worth approximately $3.4 million. But that wasn't all. The design studio also contained something even more valuable to certain collectors: original architectural drawings. Not just my own work, but pieces I'd collected over the years. Blueprints from famous Vancouver architects. Original renderings from heritage buildings. Some from the 1920s and 30s, before the Great Depression. These weren't just papers. They were pieces of Vancouver's history. The collection was appraised at $800,000. Total assets in that studio, between property documents and the design collection, approximately $4.2 million. I'd built this quietly, carefully. Eleanor knew about everything, of course. She'd helped me research properties, review contracts, build the collection. But after the accident, after I lost both her and Sarah, I became even more protective. These assets weren't just investments. They were my legacy for Alex, the physical manifestation of 43 years of discipline, vision, and patience. Alex knew I'd been an architect. He knew I still sketched and drafted in the studio. But he thought it was just hobby work, an old man tinkering with designs that would never be built. He had no idea about the property portfolio or the valuable collection inside. I'd planned to tell him eventually, when he was older, more established, more prepared to understand the responsibility that came with this kind of wealth. But Madison's arrival changed everything. I watched them over the following months. Alex was completely infatuated. He'd never had a serious girlfriend before, and Madison's attention intoxicated him. But I saw things he couldn't see. The way she'd casually ask about my properties during conversation. The way she'd Google addresses when she thought no one was watching. The way she'd make comments about Alex's modest lifestyle, planting seeds of insecurity disguised as concern. 3 months into their relationship, I hired a private investigator. Some people might think that's extreme, but I needed to know who my grandson was getting involved with. The report came back 2 weeks later, and it was worse than I'd feared. Madison had been engaged once before, to a commercial real estate agent in Burnaby. She'd convinced him to add her name to a condo title, then broke off the engagement and fought to keep her share. The courts eventually forced her to relinquish it, but not before she'd lived there rent-free for 8 months. Before that, she'd dated a divorced software executive in Richmond, persuading him to finance her lifestyle brand to the tune of $40,000. When that relationship ended, she kept the equipment and refused to repay the loan. She had a pattern. She targeted men with potential access to wealth, older successful men, or younger men from wealthy families. Alex himself wasn't rich, but I suspected she'd done her research. She'd figured out I owned my property outright, that I'd had a successful architecture career, that Alex was my only heir. She was betting on inheritance, on family money she could access through marriage. I didn't tell Alex about the investigation. I knew he wouldn't believe me. He was in love, or thought he was. Any criticism of Madison would push him away, make him defensive. I'd seen it happen to other grandparents with their grandchildren. So I waited, I watched, and I prepared. 6 months into their relationship, Alex told me they were getting engaged. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. I hugged him, congratulated him, told him I was happy for him. What else could I do? The engagement party was at a trendy venue in Gastown. Madison had chosen it, naturally. Alex looked uncomfortable when he mentioned the cost. $14,000 for an engagement party. For a junior software developer and his fiancée who worked part-time as a social media consultant, it was absurd. But Madison insisted it was necessary for her brand, for their image as a couple. I offered to contribute. It was expected. And I didn't want Alex drowning in debt before the marriage even started. I wrote a check for $6,000. Madison accepted it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I could see the disappointment. It wasn't enough for her. At the party, she introduced me to her friends. They were a specific type, people who measured success by follower counts and sponsored posts. When they asked what I'd done for a living and I said I was a retired architect, one of them actually said, "Oh, like building houses? That's nice." I smiled and said, "Yes, like building houses." Madison quickly changed the subject. The wedding planning was worse. Madison wanted everything extravagant and Instagram-worthy. A venue in Whistler that cost $70,000. Flowers that cost $22,000. A dress that cost $15,000. A photographer and videographer package for $18,000. The total budget ballooned to over $175,000. Alex was drowning in stress. I could see it consuming him. He'd taken out loans. He was doing freelance coding work on weekends. He looked exhausted every time I saw him, but he wouldn't scale back. Madison had convinced him this was what successful couples did, that it was an investment in their future together, that his love for her should be worth any price. I contributed again, $35,000 toward the wedding. It hurt to do it, knowing where that money was really going, but I couldn't watch my grandson destroy himself financially. Madison thanked me politely, then immediately started discussing the honeymoon. She wanted the Maldives, another $25,000 Alex didn't have. During this period, Madison started visiting my house more frequently. She'd come with Alex for Sunday brunches, but she'd arrive early or linger after he left, always finding excuses to explore. She'd ask pointed questions about the house. How long had I owned it? What was it worth in today's market? Had I considered downsizing? One Sunday, Alex had to leave early for a work emergency, some server issue at his startup. Madison offered to stay and help clean up. I agreed, curious about her next move. After Alex left, she made it. "Harold," she said, using that sweet voice she employed when she wanted something. "Alex and I have been talking about our future. We're thinking about buying a place after the wedding, maybe a townhouse in Burnaby or New West, but the Vancouver market is absolutely crazy." I nodded, loading the dishwasher. "We were wondering," she continued, "have you thought about selling this big house? It's a lot of space for one person. You could move into a nice condo downtown, maybe in Yaletown, and help us with a down payment. You'd essentially be giving Alex his inheritance early, and you'd be making his life so much easier." There it was, the ask I'd been waiting for. I turned to face her, drying my hands on a towel. "I appreciate your concern, Madison, but I'm quite comfortable here. Eleanor and I built our life in this house. I'm not ready to leave." Her smile tightened. "Of course, I understand. I just thought, family helps family, and Alex is really struggling with these wedding costs." "Alex is an adult," I said calmly. "He makes his own decisions. If the wedding's too expensive, you two can always scale back. Plenty of beautiful weddings happen for $30,000 or $40,000. Her eyes flashed cold. "Scale back? This is the most important day of our lives, Harold. Don't you want Alex to be happy? Don't you want to support your only grandson?" "I want Alex to be financially stable," I replied evenly. "There's a difference between supporting him and enabling poor decisions." She left shortly after, barely saying goodbye. I knew I'd made an enemy. The next day, Alex called me. He was upset. Madison had told him I'd been dismissive of their wedding, that I'd suggested they have a cheap, embarrassing ceremony. It wasn't true, but Alex was too emotionally invested to see clearly. We had a tense conversation. For the first time since I'd started raising him, my grandson and I argued. "You just don't like her," Alex accused. "You've never liked her, have you?" "I want you to be careful," I said. "Marriage is a huge commitment. You think I'm making a mistake. I think you're rushing. You've only known her 8 months. You married Grandma after 6 months," he shot back. He was right about that. But Eleanor and I had been different. We'd been young and broke together, building everything from nothing. Madison wasn't interested in building. She wanted everything ready-made, delivered, monetized for content. But I couldn't say that. So I backed off. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just being an overprotective old man. You're 26. You know what you're doing." The conversation ended awkwardly. We didn't speak for nearly 3 weeks. It was the longest silence between us since I'd started raising him. Then, 4 months before the wedding, Something happened that changed everything. Alex called me on a Wednesday evening. He sounded hesitant, uncertain. "Grandpa, can I ask you something about the studio?" My pulse quickened. "What about it?" Madison was asking about it. "She says she's seen you going in there with packages, like you're storing something valuable. She's convinced you're keeping something important in there, something that could help us financially." I chose my words carefully. "It's my workspace, Alex. I have drafting equipment, old project files, architectural materials. Nothing unusual. Can I see inside?" In all his 26 years, he'd never asked directly. The studio had always been off limits, and he'd respected that boundary until now. Until Madison had planted the idea in his head. "Why do you want to see inside?" I asked. "Madison thinks maybe you have valuable architectural drawings or property documents in there. Things that could be sold or leveraged if we needed help with the wedding or a house down payment." There it was. She was pushing him to investigate, to discover what she suspected was hidden there. "Alex," I said slowly, "that studio is my private space. I've never let anyone in there since your grandmother passed. I'm not ready to share it yet. Please respect that. When the time is right, I'll show you what's inside, but not now." Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "Okay, Grandpa, I'm sorry for asking, but I knew it wasn't over." Madison had caught the scent of something, and she wouldn't let it go. I upgraded my security that weekend. I installed 4 high-definition cameras, covering every angle of the studio, motion-activated, connected to my phone, recording to cloud storage. If anyone tried to get inside, I'd know immediately and have proof. I also changed the locks. The studio had always had a standard deadbolt. Now I installed a smart lock with a code that only I knew. I reinforced the door frame with steel. I added sensors to both windows. I even installed a silent alarm that would alert me and a security company if anyone attempted entry when I wasn't home. Alex noticed when he visited 2 weeks later. We were having coffee in the kitchen when he glanced out the window toward the studio. "New security system, Grandpa?" he asked. "There've been some break-ins in North Van recently," I said. "Just being cautious. You can't be too careful these days." It was partially true. There had been a break-in 2 streets over last month, but that wasn't why I'd fortified the studio. Alex nodded, but I could see he didn't entirely believe me. Madison was in his ear constantly now. I could tell by the way he looked at me, like I was hiding something from him, like I was the problem. I was hiding something, of course, but for the right reasons. The wedding approached. Alex was drowning. He looked thinner every time I saw him, dark circles under his eyes. The joy that should have accompanied wedding planning was completely absent. Madison, meanwhile, was thriving, planning, posting, building her brand around the wedding, with hashtags about her dream day and perfect love story. I attended the tastings, the fittings, the venue walkthroughs. I played the role of supportive grandfather, but inside I was counting down, wondering if Alex would wake up before it was too late. Then 3 weeks before the wedding, I got the alert on my phone. It was 3:42 in the morning, motion detected at the design studio. I opened the camera app on my phone and my heart rate spiked. Madison. She was at the studio door, trying to enter the code on the smart lock. She must have watched me from somewhere, or maybe she'd guessed I'd use something predictable. I watched her for 12 minutes. She tried different combinations. Birthdays, anniversaries, simple sequences. The lock didn't open. She tried the windows next, testing them gently, but the sensors held. I watched her pull out her phone, using the flashlight to peer through the window into the darkened studio. Finally, frustrated, she gave up. She looked around nervously, making sure no one had seen her, then walked quickly back to her car parked down the street. I had it all on video, crystal clear footage with timestamps. The next morning, I called Alex. "Can you come over today? It's important. come alone. He arrived that afternoon. Madison was at a dress fitting, thankfully. We sat in the kitchen, and I pulled up the video on my tablet. Alex, I need you to watch something. His face went through a journey as he watched. Confusion, disbelief, anger, hurt. Why would she? He started, then stopped, unable to finish. Because she thinks there's something valuable in there, I said quietly. And she's right. Alex looked at me, his eyes wide. What's in the studio, Grandpa? I took a deep breath. It was time. Come with me. We walked across the yard. I entered the code on the smart lock, disengaged the alarm, and opened the door. The studio was dark. I flipped the switches. The space illuminated. One wall was covered with flat files containing architectural drawings, each one labeled and archived. Another wall had framed original blueprints, some over 90 years old. A large table held my current sketching work. But what caught Alex's attention was the filing cabinet and the safe. Grandpa, what is all this? 43 years, I said. I've been building this for 43 years. This is my life's work, Alex. This is what I've been protecting. This is your inheritance. I opened the flat files first, showing him some of the valuable architectural drawings. Original renderings from Vancouver's heritage buildings. Blueprints from renowned architects. This collection is appraised at $800,000, I explained. Then I opened the safe. Inside were property documents, deeds, insurance papers. I own 7 commercial properties across Metro Vancouver, I continued. Small office buildings, retail spaces. I've been acquiring and managing them since the 1980s. They're currently valued at approximately $3.4 million. Alex sat down slowly on my drafting stool, staring at the documents. $4 million, he whispered, and you never told me. I was waiting for the right time. I wanted you to be older, more mature, more prepared to handle this responsibility. I didn't want the knowledge of this wealth to change you, to make you careless or entitled or a target. I wanted you to build your own life first, on your own merit. Does anyone else know? Your grandmother knew everything. My lawyer knows. That's it. I never told anyone else because I didn't want you to become a target for people like Madison. Alex put his head in his hands. She tried to break in. She was looking for this. She doesn't love you, Alex. She loves what she thinks you have access to. She sees me, a widowed retired architect with a paid-off house in North Van, and she's calculated there must be money somewhere. She's been pushing you toward financial ruin with this wedding, waiting for you to turn to me for help, hoping I'd reveal family assets she could access. Alex was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice shook. I've been so stupid. You've been in love, I corrected gently. Or you thought you were. But love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't demand a $175,000 wedding from someone making a junior developer's salary. Love doesn't try to break into your grandfather's studio at 3 a.m. Love doesn't calculate and scheme. I need to call off the wedding, he said. That's your decision to make. But yes, I think that would be wise. Alex pulled out his phone. He stared at it for a moment, gathering courage, then made the call. I stepped outside to give him privacy. Through the studio window, I could see him pacing, talking, his free hand gesturing emphatically. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. When he came out, he looked exhausted, but relieved. She denied it at first, he said. Then when I told her I'd seen the video, she got angry. Really angry. She said I was a disappointment, that she'd wasted almost a year on someone who lives in a shitty apartment and codes for peanuts. Those were her exact words, Grandpa. A year wasted. I put my arm around his shoulders. I'm sorry you had to hear that, but better now than after the wedding. We went back into the house. Alex stayed for dinner. We talked for hours about Madison, about the properties, about Eleanor and Sarah, about life and legacy. It was the longest, most honest conversation we'd had in years. Over the next few days, Alex handled the aftermath. The wedding was canceled, deposits were lost, but it was only a fraction of what the full wedding would have cost. Madison moved her things out of his apartment, things she'd slowly been migrating there without asking. He changed his locks. Her true colors emerged fully in the following weeks. She posted on Instagram about being betrayed, about how Alex had lied about his family's financial situation. She told mutual friends he'd deceived her. She even tried to sue him for the time and money she'd invested in wedding planning. But her lawyer told her she had no case. The worst moment came when she showed up at my house. Alex wasn't there. She pounded on my door on a Saturday morning. "I know what you have in there," she screamed through the door. "Alex told me about the properties and the drawings. You owe me. I spent a year investing in him." I called the police. They came within 8 minutes, escorted her away, and issued a formal trespassing warning. She never came back. Alex spent the next month recovering emotionally. He threw himself into his work, reconnected with friends he'd neglected during the relationship, and came over for Sunday brunch every single week. Slowly, I watched him heal. 3 months after the canceled wedding, we had another conversation in the studio. Alex stood looking at the framed blueprints, thinking deeply. "Grandpa, what are you planning to do with all this?" he asked. "Eventually, it all goes to you. That was always the plan. But I'm hoping to enjoy managing it for a while longer first." Alex nodded. "I've been thinking about what happened, about Madison and the wedding and everything. And I realized something. I was vulnerable because I didn't know about any of this. I thought I was just a regular guy, a developer making decent money but nothing special. When someone like Madison paid attention to me, I felt lucky, like I'd won something. "You are something special," I said firmly, "with or without these properties. You're a talented developer. You're a good man. That's what matters." "But I also wasn't prepared," he continued. "You protected me from knowing about the wealth because you wanted me to build my own character first. I understand that now. But maybe that protection also made me naive. I didn't know how to spot someone like Madison because I'd never dealt with people who saw me as a target, as access to money." He was absolutely right. It was the same insight the comments on similar stories always pointed out. My overprotection, my secrecy, had left him unprepared for manipulators. "You're completely right," I admitted. "I was so focused on protecting the assets, I forgot to teach you how to protect yourself from people who only want those assets. I should have been more open with you, prepared you better. I'm sorry for that." Alex shook his head. "Don't apologize. You did what you thought was right, and your heart was in the right place. But maybe we can do things differently going forward." "What do you mean?" "Teach me. About the properties. About managing wealth. About recognizing people who only want what you have. I want to be ready. Not just for an inheritance someday, but for life. For relationships. For making good decisions." So that's what we did. Every weekend for the next year, Alex came over. I taught him about commercial real estate, about property management, about financial planning and investment. We reviewed the architectural collection together. I taught him how I'd built everything, how I'd learned to spot undervalued properties, how I'd developed patience and discipline over 4 decades. But I also taught him other things. How to recognize red flags in relationships. 3 things that should make you suspicious. When someone asks about your finances before asking about your passions. When they praise you for what you might inherit, not who you are. When they have an excuse every time you suggest scaling back expensive plans. How to set boundaries. How to distinguish between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you represent. How to value character over appearance or social media following. Alex started dating again eventually. Slowly, carefully. He met a woman named Harper about 7 months after the Madison disaster. She was a librarian at the Vancouver Public Library. Quiet, and thoughtful. She asked about his coding work, his favorite projects, what he was passionate about building. She didn't ask about my house or my career until their fourth date, and even then, it was genuine curiosity, not interrogation. When Alex mentioned I'd been an architect, she asked real questions about the work. What had I enjoyed about designing buildings? What was my favorite project? Did I still sketch? I liked her immediately. They've been together for 5 months now, and it's completely different. There's a lightness to Alex that wasn't there with Madison. He's not stressed or anxious or walking on eggshells. He's genuinely happy. He laughs more. He's himself. Harper knows about the properties and the collection now. Alex told her after 3 months of dating, wanting to be honest, but also wanting to see her reaction. It was perfect. She was impressed by the collection, fascinated by the history of the architectural drawings, but she didn't see dollar signs. She saw 43 years of passion and careful stewardship. She understood what it meant. Last month, Alex and Harper came over for Sunday brunch. Afterward, we went to the studio together. Harper admired the drawings, asked intelligent questions about the buildings and architects, and then said something that made my eyes well up. "These are incredible, Harold. But you know what's more incredible? That you raised a grandson who cares more about writing good code and helping his team than he does about owning $4 million in real estate. That says everything about what kind of grandfather you are." Alex squeezed her hand and smiled at me. I realized in that moment that the real legacy was never the properties or the drawings. It was the values I'd passed down, the importance of character, of work ethic, of choosing people for who they are rather than what they have or what they can give you. The properties will go to Alex someday. Maybe he'll keep them and continue building the portfolio. Maybe he'll sell some and pursue other investments. Maybe he'll donate the architectural collection to a museum. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he's learned the lessons he needed to learn. He learned them the hard way, unfortunately. Madison was a painful teacher, but pain often teaches best. And Alex is wiser now. He's more careful. He's more aware. And he's found someone who sees him for who he truly is. I never allowed my grandson to enter the design studio. Looking back, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have trusted him with the truth earlier, prepared him better for people like Madison. But we don't get instruction manuals as grandparents. You do your best, you make mistakes, and you hope the people you love forgive you and learn from the experience. Alex forgave me. More than that, he understood. And together, we've built something better than what I'd originally planned. Not just an inheritance of wealth, but an inheritance of wisdom. The studio is no longer a secret between us. The cameras are still there. The security system's still active. But now Alex knows the code. He comes and goes as he pleases, often bringing Harper to sit among the blueprints and talk about their future. They're planning a wedding for next fall. Small, intimate, meaningful. The budget is $28,000, and they're paying for it themselves. They don't want my money. They want my blessing. They have it, completely. Sometimes on Sunday evenings, the three of us sit in the studio drinking coffee, looking at the old drawings of Vancouver's past while talking about their future. The architectural collection represents history, legacy, the work of talented people who shaped this city. The property documents represent decades of discipline and vision. These assets are worth millions. But sitting here with my grandson and the woman he truly loves, surrounded by the work of my lifetime, I realized the real treasure was never in the filing cabinets or the safe. It was in raising a young man who could learn from his mistakes, who could recognize genuine love when he found it, who could appreciate legacy without being corrupted by it, who could understand that protecting someone isn't the same as preparing them, and that sometimes the best gift you can give is trust. Madison tried to steal from us. She tried to manipulate, to control, to access what we'd built over generations. But in the end, she gave us something instead. She gave Alex clarity. She gave us a second chance to communicate honestly. She gave me the opportunity to teach lessons I should have taught years ago. I installed cameras and reinforced the locks to protect $4 million in assets. But what I was really protecting was something far more valuable: the relationship between a grandfather and grandson, the integrity of family, the chance to build something real together. And in the end, that's exactly what we did. We built something real, something Madison could never touch, no matter how many locks she tried to break or codes she tried to guess. The studio door is still locked at night. The cameras still record. The alarm system is still active. But now there are two people who know the code: grandfather and grandson, partners in protecting not just a collection of properties and drawings, but a legacy of character that no gold digger could ever understand or steal. That's the story of how I almost lost my grandson to someone who saw him as an access point to wealth, and how a design studio full of architectural history saved our relationship, not because of its monetary value, but because it forced us to have the conversations we should have had years ago, the honest conversations about wealth, responsibility, character, and what really matters in life. I never allowed my grandson to enter the studio, until I did, and everything changed for the better.